issues only because somebody broke the law and exposed them.
A lot of the high-profile campaigns, certainly from the 80s onwards, were born as a result of the animal rights direct action movement, whereby the ALF, for example, broke into laboratories and brought out footage and documents and brought it to the public attention.
The media owes it to American citizens to show them what is really going on in the laboratories. If there's nothing wrong with it, why is it so hard to get the images on camera? Why is it so impossible to show these images in mainstream television? If there's nothing wrong with it, what are they hiding?
When you drive by UCLA or Cedars-Sinai, those pretty walls there and the lawns, behind that, the horrors do take place.
It's very interesting when you arrive at any facility or a particular location where animals are being exploited for any reason, whether it's in entertainment or for the production of Premarin or for food or testing. People are immediately suspicious when a new person arrives, and they generally do question. I was certainly asked when I worked in a laboratory if I was an animal rights activist, and it actually came out more like a statement. We know you're an animal rights activist. And I think that's just commonplace. People know that they have to be careful in letting their little dirty secret out because people are watching. To obtain a position in any given field as an investigator, the easiest course is always the best, and there's no need to fabricate information on a resume, at least in my experience. I omitted that I worked for PETA, certainly, because nobody's going to be letting PETA come in the door. I believe my title was an associate technician when I was hired, and I had access to all the animals in the lab for the most part, and did a lot of cage cleaning, and it really didn't take very long before I was helping to hold the animals for dosing and restrain them for some of the more painful, terrible procedures.
Do you want to grab the front end and I'll grab the back end? That's what we did yesterday.
Testing methods are sort of confined to a handful of well-known tests. Oral gavage, where a tube is shoved down a throat. Nasal gastral, where the tube is shoved up into the nose. And dermabrasion test is applied on top of the animal's skin after it's been shaved and abraded. Substances can be put into the eyes, up the rectum, into the vagina, injected intravenously, and inhaled. And some of the worst tests to see are soft, fluffy little white rats that are shoved into containers the size of a hairspray can, and they're left just hanging there, sometimes for more than a day, inhaling some toxic substance.
I used to inspect laboratories for the government in the United States, and I can tell anyone who has any doubts at all that in some of the best laboratories I went into, I found beagles with their intestines on the floor left overnight when a surgical wound had become open. I found animals who had puppies stuck in their birth canal and had been left there to die. I found chimpanzees, infants, kept in cages so small that they couldn't even extend their arms over their heads. And those were in whitewashed, walled rooms with not a thing for them ever to see or do. So I also know, because I have spoken to so many scientists, so many researchers, so many physicians, that animal research is just a big business. And that unless you tap someone on the shoulder and say, look, lad, you've been doing this for 14 years, you haven't discovered anything, time to look at something more modern and up to date than force-feeding an animal, they'll carry right on doing it.
Some of the substances that we were dosing animals with had name brands written on them already. We all knew a bunch of people who were already taking these products and drugs and had been for a number of years. So what's up with the animal testing going on now when we have people that are already taking these drugs? Well, there were so many animals that I wish that I could have gotten out that I really got close to during my 8 months there. If I could have saved anybody, boy, I wish I could have saved James. James was a primate that was so unlike the other primates in a lot of respects. The animals, the primates that are there, some are bred either nationally or internationally, and some are actually still wild caught. He came from China through a broker in North Carolina, ended up at the lab, and immediately the first time I met him when I went into clean, I knew he was different than all the other primates. He just really connected with me, and I connected with him. And I remember that day feeling, when I left work that day, like I finally had a friend in the laboratory, which probably sounds corny on some levels, but the other primates are obviously terrified, and James was too, but the other primates would run to the back of the cage and shriek and try to get away from people. And as soon as I just gave James a few seconds of my attention outside of his cage, he just reached out for me right away. It was as if he was really accustomed to people. Over the course of the next several weeks, I really spent a lot of time, as much as I could, with the busy workday with him, and he would eat orange pieces out of my hands, and on more than one occasion when I was kneeling in front of him, he would reach out and start grooming my eyebrows and sort of tugging out the bonnet over my hair, because he wanted to, you know, perform what his species perform, which is the natural grooming of family members.
Your turn. Your turn. Your turn.
His behavior changed so radically when the testing started. When he was first acclimated to the ECG ward, he became much more submissive and fearful, and as the weeks progressed, it was harder and harder to get him to even focus on me. He would be sort of scattered and looking around at different things, because certainly I was a person that compromised his trust after that point. I looked like every other technician who came in and did terrible things to him. But when I see him, it is striking to me how profound this relationship was with this little guy. And while there were so many animals that I wish I could have gotten out,
My name is Dr. Jerry Vlasic, and I'm a trauma surgeon working in the Los Angeles area. My job is to take care of patients that come into a major trauma center that have been injured, maybe in a major car accident, or perhaps have been shot or stabbed. As a physician practicing on the front lines in the trauma